house that you put it in, one drawing and then a real house. These were Italian Renaissance derived. Taking the elements, you see the pediment over the door, you see the arches, you see here the Ionic columns, you see here rows of columns. So clearly you're picking up motifs from the Renaissance. You're even seeing the rounded windows that we see around a dome. But again, you just look at the detail. It's not going to look the same way a Renaissance building would have looked. It's also not as symmetrical as a Renaissance building. So it's planting the decorative elements onto it. Inside, this interior was, and this is, again, this is a historic house. If you're ever up in Portland, Maine, this is open to the public. It's done, the interiors are done by Herder Brothers. Herder Brothers were the go-to decorating firm of a good chunk of the 19th century. For anybody who was anybody with money, all of the upper, not all is too strong, but a good majority of the upper level people in the country used Herder to do their homes. To the point that Herder Brothers had their own exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum. Now it's probably, I have the book, so I think it was in the early 90s. But a book of, they had workshops. There were two brothers, Gustav and Adolf Herder, German expatriates, who came here and opened the decorating firm. They had their own workshop for furniture. They had their own drapery shop. So you could go to them and they would produce everything as well as design it and send the workers to install it. And so they were responsible for everything in this house. What you're seeing here are a little bit of what we don't like about the Victorian era, which, remember, encompasses several of these styles. This is lots of pattern, lots of strong color, a lot of clutter. This is cleaned up more than it would have been originally because people have to walk through the house. But this is certainly more overwhelmingly decorated than anything any of us would tend to live in today. In a piece like this, you see it, you see the ornament. Basically, the form is pretty standard. This is a cabinet with an upper piece. But you see a lot of this ornament could have been done with machines. You don't have to have everything hand carved. Now, in the Renaissance, this would have been a hand-cast gilt ornament, applied ornament. Here it's carved, probably by a machine. A lot of this could have been stamped out. This is a lighter wood than would have been seen in the earlier period. They like mixing woods. And all of this, a lot of this decoration, this isn't all hand applied on the wall. You have fabric upholstered walls, you have wallpaper used, and of course you have extensive carpets, many of which for the best carpet would have been imported. And remember, lights came in, this was gas light. The end of the century, you had electric lighting, which changed everything. But you see the degree of ornament which was used here. These, again, were cast, but these could have been machine cast. So this was expensive, but not individually custom made. I'm just showing you a couple of other interiors done in the style. You look at ornament, very often in Renaissance Revival pieces, there was a crest at the top with an inlay, and you see these again. I'm sorry, not an inlay, an insert of something that looks very much like a cameo. Here you see in this table what is imitating or emulating. I mean, imitating, not deliberately. They didn't do hand casting anymore. They didn't need to. So this was carved and gilded. And just another view of the same room. With a close-up, I wanted you to see the elaborateness of the draperies, the very rich color, which was really richer than we would have had in the Renaissance itself, really as rich as was in the Baroque, which you remember was a later part of the Renaissance. But they bring in other things. They bring in classical sculpture. They bring in scenic paintings, which wouldn't have been part of the decor in the time of the Renaissance. John Jelliff was another one of the cabinet-making firms. So not so much an original designer in the sense of creating his own designs, but designing in the style of the time. So with the Renaissance motifs, casters on the feet here, and the sort of cameo motif here. This color, which is more of a, well, later we'll see something more magenta. There were some deep colors which you couldn't have unless you had aniline dyes, which were artificial colors, colors that didn't exist in nature. This is rather, I don't remember whether this is the piece that's in the Brooklyn Museum, but the Brooklyn Museum has a piece very much like this. A square-sided piece with motifs taken from classical architecture, which is what tells us we're talking about Renaissance revival. Dark wood, different colored painting. I'm sorry, let's go back to that one. But you see classical figures in the decoration. And here, I mentioned where I have, this is a Herder Brothers piece, which means it's not guaranteed, but this is likelier to be the more expensive piece, the more fine detail. You see the stenciling here, the hand painting of the classical figures. Most of us would not particularly like these pieces of furniture, but they are reflecting the taste of the time for which they were done. And again, the carved ornament, the eagle, which comes, you know, because it's American. These are the faces, the comedy and tragedy faces. So there's no particular reliance on we have to be exactly authentic and reproduce X kind of piece. They're adapting elements from the Renaissance and using them as much as they want, as freely as they want, in the greatest variety possible. The winged creatures here and the festoons here have, and a gargoyle here. So they're really a mix that you won't find reflected in classical, in classical architecture or in Renaissance. You can't go back and see direct references to any piece in the past for what they're using here. So they're picking up a pastiche of what they see from the past. Renaissance revival beds. Beds are fabulous. I mean, all through the Victorian era, 19th century, the beds are big, they're enveloping, you really feel as if you're being enclosed in a bed like this. They're heavy. They are, you know, you can find them today, not a lot of people want them, the dimensions are smaller. Something else I wanted to show you. Wallpaper, sometimes you paper the whole wall, sometimes you just do the decorative borders. But wallpaper meant that you could afford to have your walls elaborately decorated without expensive hand painting. I just noticed this, you have to see the little, I mean, there's absolutely no reason for that. There's that kind of extra decoration. The Morgan Library is a Renaissance revival. And has anybody been in there? Okay, the Morgan Library, well, the Morgan Library, only one of you. When you get a chance, the library is at 35th and Madison. And it has a new edition, a beautiful inner courtyard edition by Renzo Piano. But there's a Renaissance revival with a parlor, and then there is the most fabulous library. Library, you know, Morgan's Library. That's a fabulous room with wonderful decorations and all of the, you know, it's a, you know, I can't remember. Tom, is there a charge to go in? Mm-hmm. Okay, no, I have an International Museum membership. There's a charge, but it's not a lot. You really ought to go. And they have exhibitions there. They have mostly graphic exhibitions. They have very extensive written word collections. I mean, they collect library stuff. But it's a wonderful building. And again, you see, I mean, the Frick building, the Frick Museum, is again a Mazzoli on 70th Street. That's a Renaissance revival too.